The thing that we are protesting against is the arbitrary, sudden, undemocratic imposition of a rule of marking attendance rather than actually attending classes. First and the smaller point is the attendance rules themselves, which are imposing a regime of mandatory daily attendance on students from the BA to the PhD. And this is something that makes absolutely no sense, because one can understand that if you have regular classes and if there is a problem of mass absenteeism, if people are misusing the university and just using it as a place to get subsidized accommodation and food but are systemically not attending the classes, you can bring in a very harsh system of attendance to check that. Second thing is, if you want to bring in an attendance regime, perhaps you can argue that it makes sense for certain kinds of students, very young students, let's say the undergraduate students, but I cannot even begin to fathom how a regime of attendance can in any way help a PhD student. If you think that public accountability is coming from marking daily attendance, should we have a PhD student, should we be satisfied to have a PhD student who gets a handsome fellowship for 5 years or 6 years from the UGC, who marks daily attendance and doesn't produce a PhD at the end of it? Is that going to be a good measure of their work or a good outcome for us to have? Now, this is really an approach which is infantilizing the students and treating them like some kind of kindergarten children who have to be kept in line and have to be counted. And that is the role of the educational institution. It is not the role of the educational institution to foster the intellectual efforts that they are making. But our university is working in such a fashion that some idea strikes somebody, it gets into their head that there should be mandatory attendance. There is no attempt to speak to any of the stakeholders, whether it's the faculty or the students, to find out what the actual process of learning and teaching is like and whether there is a regime of attendance that would in any way make sense. There is no effort being made, there are no inputs into the framing of these rules.
If we are going to not be able to participate in decision making, we are going to have no control over even those small areas of autonomy which make our lives worthwhile. It is something very, very serious that we are faced with.
It is so absolutely absurd that even the UGC, which is not always the most liberal of bodies, in the rules that it has framed for MPhil and PhD students, all it asks for is an assessment every semester of the work that they have done. These are not protests that are about the attendance rules. These are protests that have been occasioned by a new set of rules that the administration has brought in about attendance, but they are the last straw on the camel's back, where the current protests that we are looking at have been occasioned by a kind of simmering anger that has been building up over the last 2 years as the administration has made a slew of changes in all kinds of things which affect the academic life of JNU.